Nearly everyone has heard the story of the Grand Canyon, the mile-deep wonder carved by the Colorado River, one of the greatest natural treasures in America. Millions of people go every year to marvel at its beauty, but very few know about the places that they can't go, the zones that are fenced off, labeled as hazardous, or just marked as restricted. The government says it's to protect fragile ecosystems, to keep people safe, but locals call them something else: forbidden zones. Over 100 years ago, in April of 1909, a small Arizona newspaper published an article that would spark a mystery lasting more than a century. The Arizona Gazette reported that an explorer named G.E. Kincaid stumbled upon a cave high in the canyon walls. Inside, he claimed, were artifacts that shouldn't have existed in North America at all. Statues that looked Egyptian, hieroglyphics carved into the stone, copper weapons, even mummified bodies sealed in crypts. According to the article, the Smithsonian was secretly involved, excavating the site under the leadership of Professor S.A. Jordan. And then, nothing. No follow-up story. No paper ever covered it. No Smithsonian records. Officially, the cave never existed. Now, for decades, skeptics dismissed the Gazette story as a hoax, just a piece of sensational journalism meant to sell papers. But the strange part? The article gave very specific directions. About 42 miles up the Colorado River from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon. People have searched for that cave ever since. Some claim they found something, but nothing was ever verified. The official line has always been the same: there are no hidden civilizations in the Grand Canyon, and the Smithsonian has never covered up any such discovery. That should have been the end of it. Another old legend buried under a century of speculation. But then came the ranger. Now, he asked to remain anonymous, and for obvious reasons. He still works for the park system, and telling this story could cost him his job, maybe more. But what he says happened to him on patrol changes everything. This ranger claims that he has walked this same stretch of canyon wall dozens, maybe hundreds of times. He knows the trails, the cliffs, the hidden switchbacks that tourists never see. And for years, it was just another routine patrol in Marble Canyon. But then one evening, when the sun was setting low, he saw something he swears he's never seen before. There was a hole in the rock face. Not a crack, not a natural erosion, but a clean-cut opening. Oval, geometric, and dark inside, like it swallowed the light. He stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, he thought it was a trick of the shadow. The Grand Canyon can do that. The way the light hits the stone sometimes can make it look alive. But this wasn't a shadow. He got closer, and the shape held. It was a real entrance, halfway up the wall. He scrambled up, heart pounding, every step kicking loose pebbles that skittered into a void below. When he reached it, he felt something strange. The air coming out was cool. It was too cool, as if the chamber inside went back far deeper than a normal canyon cave. He leaned in and he pulled out his flashlight. And that's when he saw the first sign that this wasn't just another hole in the rock. The walls weren't jagged, they were smooth, carved. And etched into the stone were faint lines that looked deliberate. Symbols, not graffiti, not something that a hiker had scratched in. These were deep, old markings that covered the tunnel like faded scars. That was when he remembered the old Gazette article. He had read about it once. He laughed it off like everybody else did, but standing there in the dark, looking at these carved walls, he realized that article had described this exactly. An opening high up on the cliff. Impossible to notice unless the light just hit it just right. A passageway too clean, too perfect to be natural. And it had appeared on a patrol route that he had taken countless times before, but never once did he see it. So he stepped inside. The first chamber was small, barely enough to stand in, but then it led deeper. It was kind of sloping downwards. He hesitated for a moment. Everything in his training told him to stop, to mark the location and call it in. But something was pulling at him. Curiosity, Fear? Maybe both. He raised the flashlight and he followed it down the tunnel. The walls narrowed and then they opened up into a bigger chamber. That kind of just froze him in place. The floor was flat. It was smooth, like it had been chiseled by hand. The ceiling arched unnaturally, not like any cave he's ever been in. And against the far wall were these shapes. He stepped closer, with the light trembling in his grip. What he saw next nearly made him drop it. He saw carved statues lined up in the alcoves, staring back at him with these blank stone eyes. The faces didn't look Native American. They didn't look Western at all. They looked Egyptian. And lying beneath them, resting on stone platforms, were shapes wrapped in decayed cloth. They were mummies. The ranger just stood there, his flashlight trembling in his hand, the beam cutting across the stone chamber, painting long shadows behind the statues. They were tall, carved with angular features that didn't look like anything he'd ever seen in native art. Their heads tapered, eyes wide and slanted like depictions from another time, another continent. One statue bore a cobra headdress. Another clutched a staff shaped like a lotus flower, Egyptian or something disturbingly close to it. Beneath them, the shapes on the stone platforms were unmistakable. Human forms wrapped in decayed cloth, brittle and torn by time. He leaned in closer, careful not to step too near. The cloth was blackened, fragile as ash. Through the gaps, he could see leathery skin, a skull peeking from the folds. His stomach turned. He whispered to himself, "This can't be real." And yet, the 1909 Arizona Gazette had described the same thing. According to that century-old article, Kincaid had found chambers filled with mummified remains and artifacts linking back to ancient civilizations across the ocean. The Smithsonian denied it. Everyone laughed it off as a hoax, but here it was, right in front of him, 121 years later. The ranger pulled back, fighting the urge to bolt. He steadied his breathing because he had to see more. He followed the chamber as it sloped deeper. The floor was unnaturally level, unlike the jagged terrain of natural caves. These tunnels were carved, engineered, and the deeper they went, the more the air changed. It grew colder and heavier, as if the oxygen thinned the further he walked. His flashlight flickered against the walls, etched with more markings. Not graffiti, but patterns and symbols. Some looked like hieroglyphics, but not quite. They were worn smooth, as if thousands of years of erosion had eaten them away. Now, he was about 100 feet in. He entered another chamber. This one was vast, far larger than the first. His light struggled to reach the ceiling, but he could make out towering columns carved from the natural rock, shaped into square pillars. Now, between them, there were more alcoves that lined the walls, each one holding objects. Some looked like urns, others looked like tools or copper blades green with age. One glinted back at him, a shield, its surface dulled but intact. He brushed his glove across it, and the dust fell away to reveal a pattern of interlocking circles. Then he noticed something stranger. Against the back wall, on a raised platform, sat a statue unlike the others. It was massive, at least 12 feet tall, and it didn't look Egyptian or native, or even human for that matter. Its head was elongated, its eyes bulging, and its mouth stretched into something between a snarl and a grimace. It almost looked alien. He stepped closer, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. Just worn stone twisted by time, but the longer he stared, the less human it became. And carved at its feet were dozens of small figures kneeling, as if worshipping. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. Whoever carved this, whatever civilization had been here, they hadn't just lived in the canyon. They had worshipped something inside. He swallowed hard and took another step. That's when he noticed the floor. It wasn't solid rock. At the center of the chamber where the dust had been disturbed was a hole, a perfect circle like a shaft carved straight down. Cold air drifted up from it, carrying with it a faint smell of something metallic, something old. He leaned over and he shined his flashlight into the opening. He crouched at the edge of the shaft, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam cut into the blackness, but no matter how far he angled it, no bottom revealed itself. Just endless dark. A silence so thick it pressed against his ears. He waited for the light to catch something. A ledge, a wall, even a glint of water, but there was nothing. The air rising from the hole was cold. Not the cool of a normal cave draft, but the kind of chill that gnaws into your bones. The kind you feel more than you breathe. It carried a faint metallic tang, like rusted iron mixed with something older, something that didn't belong in the stone. His heart pounding as he unhooked a small rock from the ledge. He held it in his palm, feeling its weight. Then he took a slow breath and he just let it drop. The stone fell, clattering once against the lip, and then it vanished into the dark. He looked down in the hole waiting for an echo, but it never came. It was absolute silence. The rock never hit the bottom. He blinked, frowning. Maybe the shaft curved. Maybe it was deeper than it looked. He picked up another stone, this one a little bit larger and heavier, and he just put it right over the ledge and let it drop. Again, silence. No impact, no echo. His mouth went dry. He grabbed a third, and then a fourth, tossing them in one by one. Nothing. Each stone vanished as if it was swallowed whole. It was like throwing them into eternity. He pulled back, rubbing his arms against the cold, trying to shake the dread building up in his chest. His training told him every hole had an end. Gravity didn't lie, but this wasn't right. This was something else. He sat there in silence, staring down into the impossible dark. And a thought crept in, a thought he didn't want to consider. What if there's no bottom? The Gazette article mentioned chambers, artifacts, even mummies, but it had never spoken of this. This wasn't just a hidden city carved into stone. This was something older, something deeper, a gateway perhaps. He leaned forward again, shining his light down, desperate to see something, but the beam died only a few feet below, smothered like a candle in the wind. He thought he saw movement once, a faint shimmer like heat rising from asphalt, but when he blinked, it was gone. His breathing grew shallow. He couldn't shake the feeling that something down there was aware of him, watching him. The silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. He whispered into the dark with his voice trembling. Hello? The word dropped into the shaft. It was devoured. No echo, no return, just silence. The ranger stumbled back, his boots scraping against the carved floor. He nearly tripped over one of the stone pillars. His pulse was hammering in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but he couldn't, not yet. He grabbed one final rock, the biggest one he could lift, and he hurled it into the shaft with all of his strength. It vanished into the black. He stood there, straining his ears until they ached, but still, no sound came back, no thud, no crack, nothing. He wiped the sweat from his forehead even though the chamber was freezing. He knew that this wasn't just a cave. This was something else, something that defied the laws of the world he knew. He backed away slowly, his flashlight beam bouncing across the alien statue and the kneeling figures and the endless shadows. He couldn't shake the thought that maybe Kincaid had found this too. Maybe that's why the Smithsonian buried the story. Not because of the artifacts, but because of this shaft, a hole that doesn't end. His hand shook as he touched the wall for balance. He whispered again, this time to himself, "What are you?" The silence answered him back. He backed out of the chamber, flashlight jerking from statue to statue, the carved eyes watching him as if they knew he didn't belong. The cold air pressed against his back all the way through the tunnel until he finally emerged into the night. The sky above the canyon was black velvet, stars scattered like shreds of broken glass. He sucked in a breath of the open air, the scent of sage and dust flooding his lungs. He had never been so relieved to see the sky. Behind him, the entrance loomed, a dark mouth cut into the cliffside. He turned his light off and stood in the silence, trying to steady his breathing. For a moment, he considered going back in, documenting it, photographing the chamber, the mummies, the shaft that had defied reason. But something in him felt recoiled. He felt like he wasn't supposed to, like even carrying the memory of what he'd seen inside was dangerous enough, so he left. He climbed down from the ledge, his boots scraping against the canyon wall, every sound echoing in the vast stillness. His head spun with the impossible images, Egyptian statues, where they shouldn't be, mummies in the desert, and a shaft without an end. He barely slept that night, lying awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all over in his head again and again. By morning, he made up his mind. He couldn't ignore it. He had to go back. When the first light hit the canyon, he grabbed his gear and retraced his steps. The sun was higher now, burning away the shadows. He hiked the same path, heart racing as he scanned the cliff face. He knew exactly where he had been. He knew the ledge, the angle, and the precise spot where the entrance had appeared. But when he looked up, the rock wall was smooth. It was solid. There was no opening, no dark mouth yawning in the stone. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, convinced that he had come to the wrong place. He climbed up to check, and the ledge was there. The wall was there, but the opening was gone. It was just rock. He scrambled along the cliff face, searching, every muscle burning with panic. He went further, then back again. He was certain that he must have misjudged the spot, but it was useless. The entrance wasn't there. It wasn't hidden, and it wasn't blocked. It was just gone. He returned the next day, and then the day after that. Dozens of patrols along the same stretch, under different skies, under dawn, under dust, storm clouds, a blazing sun. Sometimes he swore the wall looked different, that the shadows hinted at the oval shape. But when he got close, there was nothing, only stone. He never saw it again. The ranger keeps his account anonymous for obvious reasons. If he came forward, he would be dismissed, maybe fired, who knows, maybe even worse. And that's the part that chills me the most. If this story is true, it means that the 1909 Arizona Gazette article, it wasn't a hoax at all. Kincaid really did find a lost chamber in the Grand Canyon. He really did walk among those statues and mummies. And the Smithsonian may have buried it not because it was fake, but because it was too real. Because inside the canyon is something the world isn't ready to know. Or maybe it's worse. Maybe the entrance itself isn't permanent. Maybe it only appears under certain conditions. The angle of the sun, the shadows at dusk, the seasons shifting. Maybe what he saw was a doorway that doesn't stay open. A vanishing threshold into something ancient, something otherworldly. He dropped stones into the shaft that never ended. He walked among statues of figures that weren't quite human. He saw a place that shouldn't exist and now can't be found. The Grand Canyon holds more than just beauty. It holds secrets. Places you and I will never see. Fenced off, forbidden, and maybe that's not just because the government wants it to be that way. Maybe it's because the canyon itself decides who gets in and who doesn't. And the ranger found it once, and he never found it again.